Imagine a civilization so advanced, so powerful, that when it vanished, it took everything with it. No ruins, no survivors, no trace. Just a story told by one man, more than 2,000 years ago. A story so detailed, so specific, that scientists, archaeologists, and historians are still arguing about it today. That man was Plato. And what he described wasn't a myth, it was a warning. This is the real story of Atlantis, not the Hollywood version, not the fantasy, but exactly what Plato wrote, word for word, and why the world still can't stop looking for it. Around 360 BC, the Greek philosopher Plato wrote two dialogues, Timaeus and Critias. These weren't adventure stories. They were philosophical texts, written as serious political and moral discussions between real historical figures, and buried inside them was a description of a civilization that Plato claimed existed 9,000 years before his own time. He didn't call it a legend. He didn't call it a fable. He specifically said, and this is critical, that the story was true. The exact Greek word he used was alethinos, meaning genuine, real, factual. So what exactly did Plato describe? According to Plato, Atlantis was a massive island empire located in the Atlantic Ocean, just beyond the Pillars of Hercules, what we today call the Strait of Gibraltar. It was larger than Libya and Asia Minor combined. That's not a small island, that is a continent. The Atlanteans were not primitive people living in mud huts. Plato described a civilization of extraordinary sophistication. They had a capital city built in a series of perfectly concentric rings, alternating circles of land and water, like a bullseye carved into the earth. The rings were connected by tunnels large enough for ships to pass through. The outermost ring alone was 3 stadia wide, roughly 550 meters. At the center of this ringed city stood a royal palace and a temple dedicated to Poseidon, the god of the sea. Plato describes the temple walls as being covered in orichalcum, a metal he calls the second most precious substance in the world after gold. To this day, no one agrees on what orichalcum actually was. Some say it was a bronze-gold alloy, some say it was amber. Others say it simply doesn't exist, which raises the question of why Plato would invent such a specific detail. The Atlantean military, according to Plato, was staggering in scale. He lists it precisely: 10,000 chariots, 1,200 warships, and a standing army of over 1 million men. These numbers are so large that many scholars have used them as proof that Plato was exaggerating for effect. But others point out that Plato was a methodical writer. He didn't deal in vague poetic imagery. When he gave numbers, he gave them deliberately. The Atlantean kings were descended from the god Poseidon himself, who, according to the myth, fell in love with a mortal woman named Clito and built the ringed island to protect her. Their 10 sons became the first rulers of Atlantis, dividing the empire between them. The eldest, Atlas, from whom the island took its name, ruled the central kingdom. For generations, Plato writes, the Atlanteans were noble, wise, and just. They had everything they needed. The land produced food in abundance. The mountains sheltered them. The sea obeyed them. But then, something changed. Plato describes the corruption of Atlantis in terms that feel almost modern. As the generations passed, the divine blood in their veins grew thin. The human nature began to outweigh the divine. Greed replaced wisdom. Power replaced virtue. The Atlanteans began to look outward, toward conquest, toward domination. They launched a massive military campaign, pushing east through Europe and North Africa, attempting to enslave the entire Mediterranean world. Only one force stood against them: Athens. This is where Plato's story becomes politically fascinating. In his telling, it was the ancient Athenians, not the Spartans, not the Persians, who alone repelled the Atlantean invasion and liberated the peoples they had conquered. Plato was an Athenian. He was writing at a time when Athens was in political decline. Many historians believe Atlantis was at least partly a literary device, a mirror held up to Athenian society, showing what a great civilization looks like when it loses its moral compass. But here is where the story takes its most dramatic turn. Shortly after the Atlantean defeat, Plato writes that the gods themselves passed judgment in a single day and a single night. His exact words: violent earthquakes struck, catastrophic floods rose, and the entire island of Atlantis sank beneath the ocean. Gone. Completely. Permanently. 9,000 years before Plato's time. That would place the destruction of Atlantis at approximately 9600 BC, right at the end of the last ice age, when sea levels were rising dramatically across the entire planet as glaciers melted. That detail is not nothing. Here at Ancient Atlas, we've looked at dozens of proposed locations for Atlantis, and the serious candidates are more compelling than most people realize. The most scientifically discussed location is the Azores. Azores, Santorini, Doggerland. When you reach, could the memory of Doggerland's disappearance have traveled through oral tradition, been recorded by Egyptian priests, and eventually reached Plato? It's not impossible. What makes Plato's account impossible to simply dismiss is the sheer specificity of it. He doesn't just say there was a great island, he gives dimensions, he gives architectural details, he gives the names of kings. He describes the layout of the capital city with the precision of someone reading from a source document. He even describes the geology. These are not the details of a fairy tale. These are the details of a report. The story, Plato says, came from the Athenian statesman Solon. After and in those records was the story of Atlantis. So where does that leave us? The honest answer is, we don't know. No confirmed physical evidence of Atlantis has ever been found. No ruins pulled from the Atlantic floor. No inscription. No artifact. Every expedition has come back empty. But the question refuses to die, and perhaps that tells us something. We live in an age where we are still discovering lost civilizations. After, the ancient world was bigger, more connected, and more sophisticated than we were taught to believe. Plato was not a novelist. He was one of the most rigorous philosophical minds in all of human history. When he chose to anchor a serious moral argument inside a story, he chose a story he believed carried truth. Whether Atlantis was a real place that sank beneath the waves, the mystery it poses is the same. How much of the human story have we forgotten? How many cities lie beneath us right now, under the sea, under the sand, under the ice, waiting for someone to finally ask the right question? The ocean covers 70% of this planet. We have mapped less than 25% of the seafloor. Atlantis may be waiting, or it may already be found, and we simply haven't recognized it yet.